looking to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Maricar Velasco delivering to you the latest news in and around the ASEAN region. On today's headlines. Malacanang on Monday said a Chinese Coast Guard ship having blocked the path of 3 Philippine civilian vessels on a resupply mission to BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal in the West Philippine Sea is objectionable, and the Department of Foreign Affairs is already preparing to file a protest against this action. The Secretary General of ASEAN, Dato Lim Jokoy, met with several newly appointed Japanese cabinet ministers during his recent trip to Tokyo on the 19th to the 20th of September. This was the Secretary General's third visit to Tokyo this year. Ferrari's Sebastian Vettel ended his year-long drought without a win at the Singapore Grand Prix on Sunday, mastering a hazy circuit to claim a record 5th triumph in the city-state. Malacanang on Monday said a Chinese Coast Guard ship having blocked the path of 3 Philippine civilian vessels on a resupply mission to BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal in the West Philippine Sea is objectionable, and the Department of Foreign Affairs is already preparing to file a protest against this action. A document from the Department of National Defense showed the incident happened last May 14, almost a month before the June 9 Recto Banker Reed Bank incident, where a Chinese vessel rammed into and sank a Filipino fishing boat and abandoned the fishermen at sea. Presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo questioned why China would block a resupply mission.
Siyempre, objectionable yun.
Okay, thank you, Joseph.
But, dadala lang pala ng pagkain, ba't mo naman iba-block?
Panelo, however, said there is a need to find out China's reason for blocking the resupply mission. The palace official said Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Teddy Boy Locsin Jr. is already preparing a protest against China's action.
Turf niya na yan. Siyempre, I will leave that to the Secretary of Foreign Affairs. Turf niya na yan.
To date, the Philippines has filed several diplomatic protests on the continued presence of Chinese vessels in Philippine waters. President Rodrigo Duterte ordered the Department of Energy and other concerned agencies to look for other sources of oil to maintain the country's current energy supply. Presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo said this was Duterte's directive to cushion the impact of rising oil prices following drone attacks on government-run oil facilities in Saudi Arabia more than a week ago.
Sabi ni Presidente, inatasan niya na sila, yung mga involved na agencies, na maghanap ng ibang mga sources ng oil para manatili yung ating supply.
Panelo, meanwhile, said Palace will also review the proposal of the DOE to issue an executive order to form an oil contingency task force.
Then we will wait for the request, and the Palace, the Office of the President, will study it.
Several oil companies will increase prices of their fuel products for the second week in a row on Tuesday, September 24, 6 a.m. due to supply issues. In advisory, Sea Oil, Petrogas, PTT Philippines, Petron Corporation, and Flying V said prices of their respective gasoline products will be hiked by 2.35 peso per liter and diesel by 1.80 pesos per liter. Petron, Sea Oil, and Flying V will also adjust upwards the price of their kerosene by 1.75 peso per liter. However, Saudi Arabian authorities assured supply is expected to normalize in the near term. Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. said Friday the Philippines can manage without the loans from states that voted in favor of an Iceland-led resolution which sought a review of the human rights situation in the country. Good idea. We don't need the money. We've more than enough without turning to anyone outside except Japan, of course, whose generosity is unconditional, quick, and whose motivation is honestly to help the Philippines. The rest are tongue-in-cheek and negligible. An Inquirer article dated September 20 reported that the Office of the President issued a confidential memorandum suspending the negotiations or signing of all loans and grants from the 18 nations that back the United Nations Human Rights Council resolution. France and Sweden were among the non-members that co-sponsored the resolution last July, while the 18 UNHRC member states that voted yes were Argentina, Australia, Austria, Bahamas, Bulgaria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Fiji, Iceland, Italy, Mexico, Peru, Slovakia, Spain, Ukraine, the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland and Uruguay. Meanwhile, on Monday, presidential spokesperson and legal advisor Salvador Panelo clarified that the memorandum on the loan suspension was indeed issued by Medialdea upon the order of the president. He added that the president could not comprehend why Iceland was more concerned about the alleged drug-related deaths but allowed the killing of unborn babies. Iceland recently spearheaded a resolution seeking an inquiry into the drug-related killings in the Philippines.
He explained to me why he feels that the Iceland resolution is not only offensive but is also to him, but also offensive to this country, because that Iceland resolution presupposes that we're not doing anything about the complaints about abuses, which is not true. We've been prosecuting. In fact, every death arising from police operation on drugs is automatically subject to administrative and criminal prosecution, because the SOP there is when there is death arising from any raid involving the police, immediately they are subjected to administrative and criminal prosecution. But ang problema kasi, marami nagrereklamo, may mga nagrereklamo ng police abuse, pero hindi sila nagpa-file formally. Kung mag-file naman, wala namang ebidensya. Pero pag meron, inihahain. He cannot comprehend why Iceland is so concerned about the alleged brutal slaying of suspected criminals, which occur because the lives of those people who are enforcing the law are endangered, and yet it has a law that allows killing, murdering unborn children, unborn babies, aged 6 months and below. Kaya, that's why he said, hindi po pwede ito. They're imposing their culture to us, pero tingnan mo ginagawa nila.
At least 20 people were killed and dozens more injured as fresh unrest erupted in Indonesia's restive Papua region Monday, with some victims burned to death and buildings set ablaze by protesters, authorities said. Papua, on the western half of New Guinea Island, has been gripped by weeks of violent protests fueled by anger over racism as well as fresh calls for self-rule in the impoverished territory. 16 people were killed in Wamena City, where hundreds demonstrated and burned down a government office and other buildings, authorities said. Most of them died in a fire, according to Papua military spokesman Eko Daryanto. He adds the death toll could go up because many were trapped in burning kiosks. Among the victims, 13 were non-Papuans and 3 were Papuans, Daryanto said, adding that a soldier and 3 civilian also died in provincial capital Jayapura, where security forces and stone-throwing protesters clashed Monday. The soldier was stabbed to death while 3 students died from rubber bullet wounds, according to authorities, without elaborating. About 300 people were arrested in connection with Monday's protest, according to Daryanto, adding that about 65 people had been injured. The clashes in Papua had quieted down in recent days but flared up again as hundreds took to the streets and houses and stores went up in flames. Monday's protest in Wamena, mostly involving high schoolers, were reportedly sparked by racist comments made by a teacher. However, police have disputed that account as a hoax.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mi puundin sa registration is ako August 1. Waaya edad kada 15 to 17 nakapakay ka din ang mag-register a SK voter. Ug mano edad ka na 18 o dinamyakal pasko 18 nakapakay ka mag-register a regular voter. Sungkano ko opisina o election officer sa iko ingadiyo na uban yung kalipati mawid sa valid ID. So, opisina o election officer na lumalaka ko isnin, taman ko Sabto, ko oras alas 8 sa kapipita, taman sa alas 5 ko kagabi. Igirap na holiday na lumalaka siran. Mga pagariyakan ko Islam na mag-register, tano din kataman buaya sa September 30. Paninta ko Allah at atapan iyan raktano langon so kapipya ginawa. Wassalam.
Welcome back. The Secretary General of ASEAN, Datolim Dokoy, met with several newly appointed Japanese cabinet ministers during his recent trip to Tokyo on the 19th to the 20th of September. This was the Secretary General's 3rd visit to Tokyo this year. In the 2-day working visit, Datolim met with the Japanese Foreign Affairs Minister Toshimitsu Motegi, Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry Ishu Sugawara, Minister of Environment Shinjiro Koizumi, Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries Taku Eto, and Vice Minister for Health Yasuhiro Suzuki. Datolim expressed appreciation for Japan's support and contribution to ASEAN in various fields and also congratulated their successful chairmanship of the G20 this year, which saw the participation of 4 ASEAN member states, for example, Indonesia, who is also a G20 member, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Datolim looked forward to working closely with Japan to deliver new opportunities for the region while addressing emerging challenges brought about by heightened uncertainty, new technology, aging population, and climate change, among others. In his visit, the ASEAN chief also called on several members of the National Diet, high-level officials, and private sectors representatives, including Toshihiro Nikai, Keizo Takemi, Fujio Mitarai, Sadayuki Sakakibara, and Nobuhiko Sasaki. Agriculture Secretary William Dar on Monday assured that safeguards are in place, such as increasing tariff on imports against over-importation of rice as one of the measures to stabilize the supply and price of the commodity. This as the DA has started the investigation on the excessive importation of rice, particularly with the forthcoming main harvest season. In a statement, Dar said they have started investigations and they expect to complete them by the end of September or early October. Currently, the Philippines could only produce 93% of its total national rice requirements, while the remaining 7% is imported. He said he has taken the necessary steps and the direction where they will enforce legal measures during these times when they have greatly exceeded the volume needed to fill up the slack in national rice supply, most particularly in Metro Manila and major urban rice consumption centers. This measure is in line with Republic Act 8752 or Anti-Dumping Act of 1999, where government can impose anti-dumping duties on imports of any product, including rice and other basic food items that are priced way below the current fair market value. Another option is to impose stringent sanitary and phytosanitary and inspection measures of rice imports. DAR said that to date, some 2.4 million metric tons of rice has already been imported, which has gone beyond what is needed by the country. Meanwhile, DAR assured farmers the delivery of high-quality equipment and machinery is part of the rice tarification law. Investors stayed on the sidelines Monday, resulting in the slight dip of Philippine shares and the peso weakness after Chinese trade negotiators cut short their trip to the U.S. The Philippine Stock Exchange Index ended the day at 7,867.51 points, down 0.05% or 3.60 points. Regina Capital Managing Director Luis Limlingan attributed the decline to concerns on the U.S.-China trade talks. This after the Chinese trade delegation canceled its scheduled trips to farms in Montana and Nebraska, which somewhat diminished hopes that the world's second-largest economy would repurchase U.S. agricultural commodities after it stopped to buy last April in retaliation to the tariff imposed by the U.S. On the other hand, sentiments were boosted by the rise in European stocks last Friday due to stimulus measures by several banks overseas, which in turn addressed fears for another global economic downturn. According to Director Limlingan, stocks also got a boost from European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker's remarks late Thursday, saying a Brexit deal is still possible before the OCT 31 deadline. With these factors, most of the counters tracked the main index, with the all shares down by 0.23% or 11.11 points to 4,761.24 points. Services registered the highest drop with 1.39%, followed by the mining and oil 1.07%, industrial 0.76%, holding firm 0.16%, and financials 0.14%. Only the property index ended with gains after rising by 1.18%. Volume reached 3.35 billion shares, amounting to 5.86 billion pesos. Losers led gainers at 149 to 57, while 45 shares were unchanged. Also, the local currency ended the day at 52.185 from 51.96 Friday last week.
Net25 is now available on OSN, the largest entertainment network in the Middle East and North Africa.
Watch your favorite Net25 shows on OSN channel 725, same day as the Philippines.
Net25 shows live and on demand
Anytime, anywhere,
on any mobile device on OSN Play.
Landmarks, Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Welcome back. Ferrari's Sebastian Vettel ended his year-long drought without a win at the Singapore Grand Prix on Sunday, mastering a hazy circuit to claim a record fifth triumph in the city-state. The German was chased home by teammate Charles Leclerc, who started on pole but lost the lead to the four-time world champion after making his pit stop, and Red Bull's Max Verstappen, who finished third. Championship leader Lewis Hamilton finished fourth but extended his advantage over fellow Mercedes driver Valtteri Bottas to 65 points with 6 races remaining after the Finn finished in fifth. The race got off to a clean start with the top 6 retaining their grid positions despite Vettel putting immense pressure on second-placed Hamilton in the opening lap. While a few drivers were shifting positions further down the field, the front-runners were maintaining a 1-second gap between each other as Leclerc set a slow pace to make his soft tires last as long as possible. Ferrari and Red Bull were the first of the big teams to bring their cars in for pit stops, as Vettel and Verstappen were fitted with the more durable hard tires on lap 20, with Leclerc following suit on the next lap. Leclerc, however, was dismayed to leave the pits behind Vettel. Hamilton stayed out on track in the lead to set about forging a big enough gap to retain the lead when it was his turn to come in. But Vettel, Leclerc and Verstappen were lapping much quicker than Hamilton, and when the Briton finally stopped 7 laps after his rivals, he emerged in a distant 4th place. Hamilton's only hope of victory was to capitalize on his rival's degraded tires late in the race. But 3 safety car periods, when both George Russell and Sergio Perez stopped on the track, and when Daniel Kvyat collided with Kimi Raikkonen, allowed the front 3 plenty of time to cool their rubber. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations. Stay updated about the ASEAN region. I'm Maricar Velasco, and I am 1 with 25.